Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something incredibly fascinating. We're going to explore how the absolutely punishing mechanics and the obscure hidden lore of the Dark Souls series aren't just random. They actually intentionally mirror the profound existential philosophies of thinkers like Friedrich Nietzsche and Albert Camus. Now, if you've ever played these games, or frankly even just heard of their legendary reputation, you know they are utterly unforgiving. But that brutality, it isn't just for show. It's actually a carefully constructed philosophical mirror. So, to kick things off, we really have to ask the big questions staring us right in the face. Why on earth would millions of players willingly choose to endure extreme frustration and pretty much endless suffering? It's a complete paradox, right? Normally, we seek out entertainment for escapism, just to relax. And yet, here is this massive franchise built entirely on repeated, agonizing failure. To figure this out, we've got to look at the genre itself. Creator Hidetaka Miyazaki actually designed the game's brutal mechanics before he even wrote a single word of the lore. He used this deeply punishing format, the limited healing, the incredibly rare checkpoints, those devastating enemies, to essentially force players into grappling with a very real, very human concept, and that is finding meaning in the face of suffering. The difficulty literally is the narrative. Section 1. The Mechanics of Suffering. This really brilliantly illustrates that relentless loop of live, die, repeat that defines the entire experience. You make a little bit of progress, you learn the ropes, you inevitably get crushed by a seemingly impossible boss, and, well, you start over. And let's be honest, we've all been there, staring blankly at that huge "you died" text for the 20th time, deeply questioning our life choices. But this cycle uniquely induces a feeling of deep inadequacy, which is then followed by an incredible rush of dopamine when you finally overcome the obstacle. The frustration actually shifts your motivation. That frustrating segment becomes this necessary evil that you absolutely must conquer just to prove yourself. Now, what makes this whole thing so uniquely powerful in a gaming format is the total collapse of the fourth wall. Because the game gives you a completely mute, blank slate avatar, the barrier between you and the screen just completely vanishes. When you lose, you can't blame it on bad luck. It was your mistake. Meaning, the drive to conquer the game's brutal walls becomes a deeply personal, psychological need for you, the player. You and the character basically become one single entity through all that shared suffering. Which brings us to that absolutely heartbreaking, pivotal moment in the game, the unavoidable fight with the giant, limping wolf, Sif. Sif is just an innocent guardian you have to slay to progress. When Sif's health gets low, the wolf literally starts limping in visible pain. But the game, it doesn't judge you, and it doesn't give you some emotional cinematic to let you off the hook. It just demands that you finish the job. This forces a kind of callousness that perfectly mirrors Nietzsche's amoralist framework. To survive this world, you literally have to shed your pity and act completely beyond good and evil. Right, moving on to Section 2, Gwyn's Eternal Illusion. Let's see how all of this builds into the world's hidden narrative reality. So through some carefully hidden dialogue, we actually learn that Lord Gwyn, the supposed Lord of Light, committed the ultimate sin. He was terrified of the dark, which, by the way, is the true prophesied age of humanity. So he unnaturally corrupted the course of nature by sacrificing himself just to keep the Age of Fire going. Then he and the other gods essentially fabricated religions to trick humanity into perpetuating this false reality, locking them inside these endless, agonizing cycles. Just think about the dark sign itself for a second. In philosophy, Nietzsche proposed this concept called the eternal recurrence. It's basically a thought experiment asking if you would joyfully relive your exact same life on an infinite loop. But Dark Souls takes that and makes it a literal horrifying curse placed upon finite beings. Humans are forced to live, die, and resurrect in a completely meaningless cycle until they literally lose their minds and turn hollow. And right in the middle of this bleak reality, we run into characters like Prince Lothric. Lothric represents this early, albeit failed, Ubermensch, or Superman figure. He sees right through the sheer absurdity of the world and the lie of the gods. He actually rebels against his destined meaningless path of linking the fire. But tragedy, he falls into a deep cynicism and nihilism, just locking himself away rather than truly overcoming the cycle. Section 3, the Serpent Conspiracy. Because honestly, no matter what side you take in this universe, you are being played. So, the game presents you with these two opposing primordial serpents acting as your grand guides. Frampt tells you it's your absolute destiny to succeed Gwyn and link the fire. Meanwhile, Cathay pulls you aside, tells you the truth about Gwyn's betrayal, and urges you to become the Dark Lord. It feels like this massive, world-altering philosophical choice, right? Well, a really brilliant analysis of the source material points out some undeniable clues. First off, they share the exact same voice actor with absolutely zero tonal distinction. They have identical physical models. In the original Japanese text, they are referred to as a singular world snake. And get this, there's even an in-game shield depicting a single creature with two opposing snake heads. They are literally just playing both sides of the chessboard. The big takeaway here is the sheer absurdity of the game's illusion of choice. The serpent's only real goal is to funnel as many undead as possible toward the flame. It doesn't matter what ideology you align yourself with, the world's manipulators are going to ensure you are merely serving their hidden, inescapable agenda. All right, Section 4, Philosophy of the Final Choice. Having hit absolute rock bottom, we finally arrive at the end of the game. Standing at the kiln of the first flame, right at the very edge of a rotting world, you aren't just pressing a button to trigger an ending cinematic. Because you've bled and sweated through all those brutal mechanics, you are actually proving your own psychological and philosophical evolution. At this point, the mute character and you, the real-world player, are entirely united in answering the game's ultimate question. Based on all these existential frameworks we've been talking about, you're faced with three fundamental paths. Path 1. You can link the flame, succumbing to nihilistic servitude and just blindly perpetuating the meaningless cycle. Path 2. You can walk away, ascending to Nietzsche's Übermensch by rejecting the gods and valuing your own self-overcoming. Or Path 3, and this one transcends the narrative entirely. You can embrace Albert Camus' absurdism by creating your own self-imposed arbitrary challenge runs. Like beating the entire game at level 1, actively rebelling against the game's inherent meaninglessness. Here we really see the ultimate clash of ideologies. First, we have Nietzsche's Amor Fati, which means the love of fate. This is all about accepting the grim reality as an ally for your own growth. You acknowledge the suffering and you use it to overcome yourself. Then, on the flip side, we have Camus' absurdism. This is recognizing that the universe is completely, unreasonably indifferent, viewing reality as the enemy, and choosing to rebel by creating your own meaning in spite of it all. But before you can fully realize this transformation and usurp the fire for humanity, the final expansion throws one last task at you: destroying Slave Knight Gale. Gale is out there trying to gather souls for a painter to create a brand new, gentle world. But philosophically, Gale represents hope for another world and pity for humanity. And those are two traits Nietzsche expressly warned would destroy true greatness. Seeking an escape into some imaginary better world robs your current suffering and your triumph over it of all its meaning. You have to strike him down. By conquering these monumental themes, you actually do something pretty incredible. You trade traditional mindless escapism for a profoundly deep digital journey. This whole experience holds up a mirror to your own real-world struggles. You're effectively trading your soul in reality for a digital soul, allowing that deeply human instinct to overcome obstacles, to break free in a world that explicitly demands it of you. Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. When you finally stare into the abyss of your own meaningless cycles, whether that's on a screen or out there in your own life, what will you choose? Will you just succumb to the comfortable illusion and let the cycle repeat? Or will you rise up, overcome destiny itself, and create your own meaning?